Well, welcome. Thank you so much. I'm happy and excited to be here for Start Lunch with the Arts. My name is Eric Scott, and I am a Purcellville mixed media artist, and I'm here in my sort of temporary studio. I moved my studio from the one-car garage where it normally is into my house so that I could do some live streaming and things like that. So I am very excited to be here. I'm excited to share some ideas about visual journaling with everyone. Just to kind of give you an idea, visual journaling is, some people call them sketchbooks, and I think visual journals really kind of encompass sketchbooks, scrapbooks, art journals, visual diaries. It's a really big kind of umbrella kind of term. I keep a visual journal. Usually it takes me about a year to fill one. I have one right here on my table, so I'll hold it up because it's big. This is my big 11 by 14 inch sketchbook. Started out its life as a blank sketchbook, and it's become very, very thick, and because I put a lot of stuff in it. So I have been doing visual journaling now for about 20 years. And back here on my shelf behind me, I have all my volumes of visual journals, and I've probably filled about 24 volumes, and I think this one is is currently my 25th volume, and then I have several little ones as well. So I probably have filled about 30 volumes of visual journals over the last 20 years. So it can take anywhere from 6 months to a year and 6 months to fill a journal. And so a journal really is, I consider it an everything book, and it's where I kind of start to develop ideas for my art. So I do all kinds of different art, but it all kind of goes back to working in the journal. Now, I don't try to copy things I do in the journal onto the wall, but I work out ideas, I work out themes and things like that. So anyway, I want to go ahead and switch over so that you can actually see my journal. So let me flip the camera. Okay, so I need to actually change it. All right, so I've got my big book here, got the camera above it so that you can see. First of all, you'll notice that I plaster the cover, both the front and the back cover, with stickers. Places I've gone, sometimes people give me stickers, things like that. So it's really kind of cool to see that. So anyway, my journal usually takes about a year or so to fill. That's about average, but sometimes it's less and sometimes it's more. So when I start out a journal, I always kind of put my name, my address, and I write an initiated date. So this was started March 1st, 2019. So this has just been over a year. And this is a big book, has about 200 pages in it. And typically, when I start a book, I kind of like to have an I am page. Now, the one thing you have to understand is that I don't work on a page and then move to the next page. I hop around a lot. So you're going to notice that the pages kind of here at the beginning are going to feel more complete, more finished, more resolved, because I've just been working on them longer. It doesn't mean that they are finished or completed, but since I jump around a lot, I mean, I come back and add more stuff to these pages all the time. Sometimes I feel like, yeah, they are pretty resolved. I don't think there's any more to add. But like this page, this spread actually doesn't feel as finished as some of those others. So this might be a place that I come back and add to later. And the visual journal really is, it's a document. I call them everything books because everything goes in here. So as you're looking, you might notice, I don't know if you can see underneath here, this is from TSA, from a time when I was traveling. And so when you travel with lots of art supplies, TSA checks your luggage, and I often get these notices. So this was started whenever I was out in Portland, Oregon in March 2019. And so I've just been slowly building. So everything goes in there, from labels from bottles and even the big sticker tags that they put on your luggage. And if I do something like this was from a class I was teaching about monsters, that gets glued in. I jot down notes. I do proposals for conferences and conventions. And so all that stuff kind of starts in here. So this is a place to really help me keep track of myself. to write things down, to jot things down, to plan things out. Some of the pages are going to look and feel more like works of art. They're going to be very artful, and others not so much. I do a lot of writing, as you can see. It is a journal, and I really try to document. I don't work in it daily, even though I would love to. But I do document. So I write things down, whether, like I said, it's doing notes or working out ideas, or just sort of reflecting. And so I think the journal really helps me document and reflect on things. And it's just a place like this page this spread doesn't seem super finished, and maybe it never will. Maybe this is all the further it'll go. And that's the thing. It's not about having finished artful pages. It's just about what it needs to be. So here I was taking notes on a book I was reading, this book actually. And so, it's just a place to experiment, to play, to glue stuff, to take notes, to try different ideas out. And so, like I said, these pages, I don't date the pages because I don't sit down in a single day and do it. So, I mean, these pages I've been adding to over and over and over and adding more and more. And so things like this aren't quite filled. So I might come back. I might add more to these. But like I said, it really is a place to document. I take this everywhere. My wife and I went to England last summer, and it went with us. And so this was like, a little brown bag from someplace we've shopped. So there's tickets in there from our flight and from, riding the bus and all kinds of stuff. There are, I'm talking about adding, I just added these two pieces the other day. So even though it was almost a year ago that I was in England, I just added these the other day. I've also added some of the other stuff to these pages. So these aren't really quite finished or quite filled out, but I go back and I work on top and I add more things. But most of this is from England. So a concert that we went to, that was from our hotel. So just a lot of different things glued in, maps, brochures, and it's just a great way to document. So, if you're thinking about your own journal, just a glue stick and, collecting the stuff. So how many of us have boxes full of things like the tickets and the postcards and the memorabilia? I call that fodder, Fodder, and it's, if you look it up, it's the coarse, dry food that we feed livestock, but when you glue it into the journal, that's what makes the journal really fat and thick. So just really using this to document, but even just like weird stuff. So, got a new filter for my sink, and I just glued that in there. So, I can kind of look back, and it's not that I want to remember buying this water filter. It's just, it's interesting to kind of put that in there. So just a lot of different things. I had been drawing monsters for the last 4 or 5 years, and so this was a whole bunch of them that I did as part of something where I was out in the community drawing with kids and showing them how I draw monsters. But just, a lot of words, a lot of doodles, a lot of stuff glued in. And you can see how the pages now aren't quite as filled in. They're not quite as layered. So, I keep going back and adding more and more and more. But then because, life is kind of busy, I start more and more as well. So I'm always hopping around. I'm always flipping through, trying to find a place to add a piece of collage, or to add some doodling, or to add some paint. I love using maps. So this is a map from a conference that I went to. I might put something, these look like frames, so I'll probably end up putting something in there, drawing or maybe collaging. So really just when I flip through this, I know where I was. Okay, these were from notes from that conference. There's another map. This is a map of Harrisonburg. And so just, lots of writing and reflecting, lots of collage. There's paint, there's ink. I use mostly watercolor paint. But it is a place to write and reflect and kind of thinking about, the situation over the last couple months, kind of hunkered down in my house. I've been working a lot in my journal. And it's been a way not to just reflect on it and kind of process things, because there is a lot to process, but it's just a way to keep busy, to make some art. And that's one of the reasons that I really like the journal, is that it's an easy way to kind of connect with making and creating, and all you need is a book. Some people use an old book, like an actual book with writing or pictures in it. Some people buy sketchbooks. Some people use an old composition notebook. So really, you're not limited to what you can use and what you can put into it. And so now you're really starting to see how things aren't as developed, because these are things that, maybe I think I started this a couple months ago, but I haven't done much to it. And, things slowly build up. It's this slow accumulation of ideas. So sometimes I'm just experimenting, like here I was with just some pen and ink. And then some writing. So very empty now. These are, I manage the Round Hill Art Center, and so this is from our last art show that we had. But again, a lot of writing, a lot of words. And so this is kind of getting to a place where I'm just still working, still adding, still figuring things out. And it kind of leads me into the other thing I wanted to share. I wanted to do a flip through, just so that you could kind of see how I work, and I can kind of talk about some of the things that I put into the journal. But I wanted to get back to these pages. So here I am near the back, and I'm back to blank pages, and I don't have a whole lot of blank pages left. Okay, so I'm going to kind of talk about that, but I also want to show you that I keep a calendar. So that's another reason that I like having the journal, and I draw the calendar in. I just take a ruler and draw, and I put this calendar in, and all the highlights are different activities and different things going on. And then on the very back page, I usually put a big pocket, and so that way, here's a bunch of photos and pictures and such, some fodder. I can stick that in the pocket so that it doesn't fall out. And again, tons of stickers, and then even stickers on the back cover. But I want to go back to those pages and just share a couple ideas of how you might get started, because that's the hard thing. So people will get really excited about journaling, and they'll get a book and they'll get materials, and then they get really scared because, oh no, blank white page. What do I do with this? And it can be intimidating. And so what I like to do is I like to just make it so it's not blank. So I'm going to share a couple really quick, easy ways to kind of dive into the journaling, and the way you can kind of take this up. So you might not be able to see it, but I got some watercolor and some water over on the side here. And so I've got a nice big stiff nylon brush, just going to dip it in my water, and I'm just going to pick this blue. So I've got a little bit of paint on my brush, and I'm not going to paint a picture. I'm just going to get some color down, and I'm not worrying about it being all neat and precious and it's got to be perfect and nice and smooth. Actually, I like it when it's not nice and smooth. I like it when it's all kind of textured. And that's just that notion of letting go, of not being too concerned. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people are like, oh, well, I'm not good at art, and so I can't make anything that's worth the time and effort. And it's like, well, things don't have to be perfect. And what I like to do is I don't like to just do one page. And notice how I'm working on the back of a page. A lot of people don't like to do that. I don't know why, but it's like, books aren't written just on one side. There are words on the back of the pages too. Anyway, so I can just kind of scrub this paint down. And there's all kind of different techniques that I can use and show you, but I don't want to get into too much of that. If you're really interested, there are lots of resources out there that talk about using watercolor paint. Actually, I did a whole bunch of videos myself on doing that, so you can always go to my personal art page and kind of see those. But it's just, I'm getting something down. Now, maybe I want to add a little bit more to this, so I'm going to get my brush wet again. I'm going to use that exact same blue, get a lot of paint, but this time I'm going to splatter. This is messy, so if you're doing this at home on the sofa, you might want to reconsider. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up. So notice the brush is out flat. It's parallel with my book. Actually, if I point it down a little bit, that's even better. I'm going to pull up, kind of pull up and back toward my nose, and that splatters the paint. So this is just watercolor paint, and I like watercolor paint because you can get real inexpensive sets and they work great, and you don't need super that's the other thing. A lot of people are like, oh well, I need all these expensive materials, and it's like, you know what, watercolor paint, you can buy a real nice inexpensive set for like less than $10. In a journal, you can, you know, buy a blank book for pretty inexpensively too. So and then all you might need are some pens and a glue stick and things like that. So I've got that started. I want to let that dry. I could pull out a hairdryer and dry it really quick, but I've got other blank pages, and this is how I like to work. Now, some people are like, oh, well, it's wet, you're going to mess it up. Yeah, exactly. It's going to do something I can't predict, so I'm going to flip the pages. Actually, let's go ahead and rub them together. Now, I'm not going to work on this page because it is wet. I want this to dry. I'll come back to this later. But then maybe I'll skip. And sometimes that bugs people. They're like, oh, well, but you have to finish this before you move on. Who said? This is my book. I can do it however I want to do it. So another material I love to use besides watercolor is a pen, just a plain ink pen. This is a Uniball Vision Pen. It is a waterproof, fade-proof pen. I like those pens. I also like, there's a company, if you have some art pens, this is Faber-Castell Pitt Artist Pen. I like that a lot too. Again, it's waterproof and fade-proof. So big blank white page again. How do I get started? Well, what if I just do something random? And I'm going to take my pen and I'm just going to do some random lines just to kind of divide that space. And I hope you can see that on the video. And so all I'm doing is adding some lines, just some random things. Okay, and then I can be like, all right, I'm done with that. Now what do I want to do? Well, maybe I want to turn the page. Maybe I want to go back. So this is where I like to jump around. So that started. Let me just jump around. I'm playing. I'm being, experimental. So again, I mean, that looks really cool with all the splatters and nice textures. But let's go back. Here's one where I did bubble wrap. So you can paint bubble wrap and stamp it in. There's so much stuff you can do. Actually, let's go ahead and work on this. So another material that I love to use is something called Watercolor Pencil. And so I've got one right here. Actually, this is Derwent Inktense Pencils. So technically it's not watercolor, it's ink, but it works just the same way. So you can get watercolor pencils or these Inktense pencils, and they look just like colored pencil. And so I'm going to do it over here. So if I take this and I draw with it, oh, it looks just like colored pencil. But then if I shade with it, if I put down more of it, it has a water-soluble binder. So the binder is the material that holds all the pigment together. It's water-soluble, so I can paint over it and it's going to spread. So what I want to do is I want to shade down a whole lot of this. If you don't get a whole lot of the pigment down, it won't spread very well. and get that down. And then I'm going to take a smaller brush just because I've got the circles there. So I wet my brush. This is just plain water, and then I'm going to paint into that water soluble pencil. And it's going to spread that around, and it looks more like watercolor paint. So the watercolor pencils are some of my favorites because I love to draw, but I also love the effect that painterly effect to it. So it just gives me a kind of the best of both worlds. It gives me more control, that control like I have whenever I draw, but then it also gives me that nice painterly, that nice painted look as well. And I have to make sure I put a lot of that color down, a lot of that pigment, so that it spreads. And so this is how I easily layer one thing on top of another. And then I can let this dry, and then I can do something on top of it. Another way I like to start stuff, like this page was started with the collage, so I glued that in. I'm not going to worry about showing that to you today, but it's just an easy way to get something started. So again, that's wet. If I want to let it dry, I can. I can use a hair dryer, or I could just turn the page. So notice how I'm working backwards now. So I can go back into my journal and start to find spaces that I want to do things. So maybe I'm looking at this space and I'm like, oh, you know what? I kind of see this column right through here. So maybe I just want to do some random shapes. So when I'm starting pages, I kind of start very randomly. A lot of people ask, like, well, do you have an idea in mind when you start? Do you have a particular theme in mind? And typically, no. Typically, I just start working, and I start putting stuff down on the page. And as I work, the ideas come. I don't try to imagine or envision what the pages are going to look like. Usually. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I'll get a word stuck in my head, or I'll think of something like, oh, I need to do a page about such and such. So that quickly I've added something else. I might come back later, put some watercolor pencil around it. But just kind of flipping through and seeing there's more of that bubble wrap. So there's all kind of different techniques and ideas that you can start to use in the journal. So I just wanted to do a very, very quick flip through just to kind of give everyone just a real quick peek into my journaling, and then just to give you a little bit of a taste of how I get started and how I work in my journal. And those little actions, they accumulate over time. And I think that's what's really interesting about this way of journaling, is that it's not just a day-to-day kind of recording of what's happening, but it's how I'm responding to the world. It's how I'm documenting my time in the world. And it's the way for me to process and respond to the world. So yeah, I just kind of think like journaling is such a powerful thing for me. And I've had a lot of friends, folks that don't really consider themselves artists. They've gotten into this because you don't have to be an artist to do a visual journal. You're not making art with a capital A. You're just creating and making and adding and just doing that, just making something, using your hands. It's amazing how it can help you process, help you reflect, help you document just your life in general. So yeah, I encourage everybody to do some kind of journaling, and art journaling is just a great way to do a lot of different things, and a great way to really document your life. So anyway, I really appreciate you spending some time with me today, and yeah, so hopefully you'll go out and be interested and want a journal. I am going to do a shameless self promotion plug. So I am a local artist. I do have some online workshops out there. I've got all kind of resources. I have a website. I have my own Facebook page. So if you're interested in any of that, please go and check that stuff out. So yeah, really appreciate you all being here today, sharing, taking a peek, and being here. So thank you so much. Just want to say thank you once again, and happy creating.